Hey, what's up? This is Marcus from Machine City Audio here on behalf of Overloud, and welcome to part 2 of the video series Mixing with Overloud Plugins. Now for the first video we did some top-down mix bus processing, so if you haven't seen that video, please watch that one so you can get caught up. And this is video 2 and we're going to be doing some EQing. Alright, so in today's video we are going to be using the EQ84. And if you saw my first video, you saw that we used this one, and this is a really great EQ, a Neep style EQ. And we're also going to be using the EQ550, which is the API style EQ. Alright, so you might have noticed that this track has a lot of low frequencies and it really sounds dark and muddy, so we want to clean that up. Now normally I like to do the bass and the drums first before I get into other parts of the mix, but for this mix I feel like we need to attack these low frequencies first and get out some of this mud. I have a plugin loaded up called Levels from Mastering the Mix, and I know this is not an Overloud plugin, but this is part of my mixing process, so that's what I want to show you guys. Alright, so they have a feature on here called Bass Space. So this allows you to see the low frequencies that are fighting against each other, and it could be fighting with your bass and your kick, causing everything to get masked and everything to sound muddy. So we want to make sure we keep control of that. This plugin is real simple to use. What you do is mute your drums and you mute the bass, and then you play all the other tracks, and it's going to show you all the low frequencies that are in there. Alright, so let's do that right quick. Alright, so I have levels loaded up and I have my drums and my bass muted, so I'm going to play the track. This is going to show us all the low frequencies that are left even without the drums and the bass. Now we really shouldn't have too much down there, so if I have a lot, then I mean we have some problems and we got some EQing to do. Alright, so let's do it. Alright, so as you can see, we have a lot of low frequency buildup in this mix. I mean, to the point where it's causing us to redline. So what I'm going to do is solo through each one of the tracks so we can see which one of the tracks is causing this spike. Alright, so as you can see in here, the electric piano has way more bass in it than it should have, and the organ does as well. Alright, so I have the EQ84 pulled up for the electric piano, so we're going to start on that first and clean it up, and then I'm going to move to the organ. Alright, so now that we cleaned up the electric piano and the organ, let's go back into levels and check out the bass space now and see if we cleaned up any of those low frequencies that are down there now. Now there's a little bit that's fine with me because I don't want to thin them out too much. So I still want to leave some kind of low frequencies, just not so much to where it's affecting the low end and the drums. Alright, so let's check this out. Alright, so now that we had those trouble areas cleaned up, the mix does sound a bit better, but it still needs some more work. So what I want to do now is play you a before and after of all the EQing I've done so far on this mix, and then I'm going to talk to you about why I made some of those EQ moves. Alright, but let's hear the mix first. So as you can hear, there was a difference between the before and after. You can hear the mix a lot clearer with the EQ, that rumble was gone, and just everything sounds better. So the next thing I want to talk about was the drums and why I have 3 EQs on the drums. Now when it comes to mixing, there's a lot of advice and a lot of people telling you, you shouldn't use this amount of processing. It's way too much. But I feel like if you need to achieve a certain sound and it takes a lot of processing to achieve that sound, then, do what you got to do. And that's what I did in this case. Now, I also want to point out with these 3 EQs, they're all doing something different and it's subtle. It's really not crazy moves. Alright, so let's start with the first one. So with the first EQ, I just used this one to clean up the drums a bit and to beef it up just a little bit. So let's do some before and after with just the first EQ on. Alright, so as you can hear, it's not doing anything drastic. The kick did come up more and it's just a tad bit cleaner. Alright, so for the second one, I used this one to bring out the rim shot a little more. So let's hear it before and after with this one too. Alright, so again, very subtle, and I did use this to boost the kick as well, but for the last EQ I boosted at 50, and for this one I boosted at 60 a little bit. So I'm just trying to bring that kick out more and just build the drums up and make the drum sound fatter. For the last EQ, I'm using the EQ 550, which is the API style EQ, and I really like boosting kicks and low end with bass with this EQ. I think it just has a thickness and a punch to it that you really can't get with any other EQs. Alright, so I'm going to do a before and after with the EQ 550 and listen to the kick and just the thickness of the drums. Alright, so as you can hear, it's really subtle, like it's not really doing a lot with all 3 of these EQs. But when I take them all out, then you'll really hear the difference in how I kind of use the EQs to layer the drums and make them fatter. So we're going to bypass all 3 of the EQs and engage them. Alright, so let's hear the full track one more time with the EQ bypassed and engaged. Alright, so that wraps up today's video, and again, this is part 2 and we are covering EQ. So please stay tuned for part 3. We'll be going over some compression, and if you haven't subscribed to that channel yet, you can catch me here on Overloud's channel or over at my own page, Machine City Audio. I am Marcus with Machine City Audio. Peace and until next time.